So devastating. Just impulsive or risky without want to start. You don't want to stop moving. Hey guys, welcome back to my series on bipolar disorder. Last week we talked about dating and bipolar disorder, and this week we're going to talk about the warning signs for a bipolar episode or a bipolar relapse. Now, it's perfect timing because I recently had a relapse. My hair is red. I entered a manic episode about 2 weeks ago, and the past week has been more mixed episodes, and a few days ago I impulsively decided to dye my hair red. I don't hate it, I like it, I'm actually really pleased with it, but I definitely was not planning on it. This video comes at an opportune time. I can really give you some recent first-hand experience. If you haven't watched the Bipolar 101 video, I suggest you go watch that. It lays down a lot of the groundwork for some of the things we're going to talk about in this video. And also, if you haven't watched the What Causes Bipolar Disorder video, I suggest you watch that as well. It helps you understand why episodes happen, and since we're going to be talking more about that, I highly suggest that you watch it so you can get the idea before going into specifics on this video. If you just want to start at the beginning and watch everything, I have a playlist just called Bipolar Education. I'll link it here, and without further ado, let's get started. I'm gonna preface with the inevitable and unfortunate statement that you will relapse, and that's okay. Some people relapse often and rapid cycle, meaning that they have 4 or more episodes in 1 year, and some people go months or years without relapsing. It really just depends on how well you're taking care of yourself and the nature of your bipolar disorder and other social determinants of health. Regardless, it will happen, and it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or that you did something wrong. It's just the nature of the illness. I feel like relapses get a pretty bad rap. I think they're often associated with drug abuse and alcoholism. There's usually a blame and shame feel to relapses, but relapsing really just means suffering deterioration after a period of improvement from an illness. Basically like falling back to the worst parts of an illness or disease after a period of recovery. And that definitely applies to bipolar disorder because we can go weeks or months or years without episodes, and we can be doing great, and then we relapse and we have an episode. So that's why we use that term. Keep in mind that bipolar disorder is unpredictable and difficult to manage, but it's not impossible. And there are signs you can look out for that could let you know when you might be relapsing. That can help you manage your symptoms better and get a head start on that, and also help you prevent your episode from getting super out of control. And that's also why it's important to have a plan in place for when you do relapse so that you can manage things better. Now let's talk about warning signs. It's better to look for behaviors rather than thoughts and feelings, and that is because behavior is more quantifiable. Like, you can measure it better than you can thinking and feeling, although it's important to be aware of your cognition, your thinking, and your feelings as well, especially if you think you're about to relapse or you are relapsing. But in that way, we typically look for behavior first. For example, hypomania and mania can make you think and feel like you're super good, you're super great, but you're actually heading into a manic or hypomanic episode and you're not great. It can be misleading, and that's why it's better to look at behavior rather than thinking and feeling. And our behaviors are typically, and I say typically, more indicative of where our thoughts and feelings are. Now I say typically because some people are internalizers. I'm an internalizer. Internalize my thoughts and feelings so I don't act on them for various reasons, and because of that it can be harder to measure what's going on in my head, so it can absolutely tear me up inside what I'm thinking and feeling, as harrowing as bipolar disorder can be, but people won't notice because I don't always show behaviors that would show that disordered and dysfunctional thinking. So that's why it's important to develop a sense of self-awareness and mindfulness about your behaviors and your thoughts and feelings to keep an eye on things. That way you're not completely surprised by an episode or a relapse. So let's talk about some typical signs with bipolar disorder for depressive episodes. And there's a lot that goes into depression. Some people have other types of depression while being in a depressive episode with bipolar disorder, and so there's different factors and different components and symptoms, but this is like just purely depression caused from bipolar disorder. Just keep that in mind. Some of the signs could be procrastinating. This can start out as not wanting to do little things like washing the dishes, putting away your laundry, even taking longer to get out of bed in the mornings than usual, like not having the energy or motivation to do tasks, even simple tasks like getting up and getting a glass of water, or reluctance doing your nighttime or morning routine. Another sign would be expressing more negative feelings and opinions, but it may start out in little bits of negativity and then 2 weeks later you're absolutely negative about your outlook on life. This could be talking about something you're generally able to handle pretty well, but for whatever reason you started to be more negative about it. Maybe you state your opinion, this is super awful, it's never gonna be okay, or life really sucks and it's just one thing after another, but it starts as something small, it's just being more negative than usual. usual. Another sign, eating more or less than usual. The eating more could be because you are looking for that sweet dopamine release by eating more carbs and sweets than usual, or only eating sweets and carbs. Or if you don't have the motivation or energy to eat and you don't want to take care of yourself as a sort of self-destructive behavior, you may not eat as much. You may eat less. And so those are the two opposites of that scale. So it could be either or. You could start to feel like you don't have the energy to make food as much. So maybe you're reheating leftovers instead of making a new meal, but it really comes out of a lack of motivation to eat. And the other one is more like eating your feelings, eating to fill the hole that is caused by depression. Withdrawing from typical activities that you normally are interested in. This could look like, you know, in the beginning, only watching TV or being on your phone because it's easier to access and you don't necessarily want to put in the effort to bake or paint or skate, you know, things that you may normally enjoy. So it's very strange when someone starts to pick mediocre things instead of doing the things they want to do normally, and that's definitely a sign of depression. Another sign, lack of energy, moving, talking more slowly. It's pretty self-explanatory, but think about it like this. Think of Eeyore. You know, he talks really slowly and he moves really slowly because he's the embodiment of depression. So if you start to notice yourself take more time to speak because it takes more effort, not explain things because you don't feel like you have the energy to explain something in full, maybe you wait longer to shower or go to the bathroom and you would just rather wait and suffer for a little bit longer. Sleeping more than usual. Now this could start maybe sleeping past your alarm and you don't usually do that, but after a few days of sleeping longer and longer, maybe it starts as 30 minutes and then it's an hour and then it's 2 hours and then a week or two later you're sleeping 10 plus hours a day. Well, I mean, unless it's your normal, but if it's not your normal, then that's definitely a warning sign. Another one, high distractibility. This can look like having a hard time making decisions or making sense of things, easily forgetting things, having a difficulty concentrating. This could be not being able to pay attention in class or at work. This could be having a harder time making decisions because there's so much to consider but you can't quite focus. The best way I can explain it is feeling like you're in a brain fog. And then the last symptom would be irritability, which is something people don't usually think about but is definitely a symptom. Okay, so let's move on to typical signs that you may be relapsing into a bipolar manic or hypomanic episode. So the number one thing I always think about is high energy. This can start as getting more things done on your to-do list, feeling more excited than usual, and just having a lot more energy, feeling like bubbly and excited and jittery. It's like brewing coffee with an energy drink instead of water. That's about what that feels like. And again, if you have hypomania, a little bit less intense, but generally the same symptoms. A second thing, feelings of euphoria, not related to normal life events. So it's not like you got married and you're elated that you're married, or you got a job promotion and you're super excited. It's just kind of out of nowhere. And this can start as feeling super happy and like super excited, and there isn't really a reason why, and the only thing that's changed is the date. So another thing, pressured or quick and continuous speech. This can look like talking really fast, talking about this thing and then all of a sudden you're on a completely different subject. It could be venting or ranting more. This could be interrupting people, not letting them get a word in because you're just still talking and you can't really help it. Something I always notice at the beginning of a relapse is I start to trip over my words because I'm talking just fast enough to where I can't focus on the word I'm speaking, and instead my brain's on the upcoming word, and so I mash them together because I'm not talking slowly enough. So that's something I always look out for, is the tripping over my own words and interrupting people. I usually don't like to interrupt people, but I notice that I definitely do when I'm having a manic episode, and it's not really something I can control. Another sign, irritability or restlessness. Irritability can be being more argumentative with people, or more antagonistic, or getting irritated by the littlest things that wouldn't normally irritate you, or being around people just makes you super on edge and you just want to like start a fight. So it's definitely something to look out for if you're arguing more than usual. I definitely notice that I'm more irritable, and if I'm irritable for no reason, I definitely know that I'm about to relapse and have a manic episode. The restlessness, it could look like wanting to go and do things, going to the store, running errands. You don't want to stay still, and it's very hard to, and so you're constantly doing things because you constantly need to be stimulated. Another sign, having a sudden high confidence and what we call thoughts of grandiosity. So the sudden self-confidence, you feel like you're so smart, so talented, so beautiful, so cool, everyone loves you, you're so important to everyone, and it's not necessarily that you are or you aren't, but you just suddenly feel that way. So you may ask out someone you've been afraid to ask out, or you may do something like ask someone out who has a significant other because you just think you're that great and they're gonna say yes, because why wouldn't they? And so grandiose thoughts have to do with thinking that you are more important or something really special or better than other people. For example, some people have delusional thoughts of grandiosity where they believe that they are a prophet or Jesus or a political figure that's super important, or somebody's coming after you. You think everyone's in love with you. It's very strange, and when I do experience that, I'm kind of taken aback because that's definitely not my normal, but I do notice myself like dressing up more, doing my makeup more because I think I'm like so pretty. And it's kind of embarrassing, but it's definitely something I look out for as I start to notice signs of a relapse. Another sign, high distractibility and having a short attention span. So I know I definitely struggle paying attention in class. It could be at work because your mind is just constantly going. An example I have, whenever I had started to have a manic episode back in August, I added 20 minutes on to a drive because I kept missing the exits because I could not stay focused on my GPS. And so my mind just kept going, and it was going from one subject to another subject. And part of that makes me forget things, and part of that makes me get really focused on something. And so like a sign could be researching something random about yourself for the next like 2 hours straight. But it's different from ADHD in that it doesn't have to do with the subject. You're just like that the whole time. So I definitely notice if I'm having a hard time focusing in class or staying focused on one task, I start to look for other signs to see if I'm having a relapse. Another thing, heightened emotions. Overly angry, overly loving, suddenly confessing your love to someone, being really intense, or suddenly crying and being very, very sad, after that being absolutely fine. Another part of that is having a heightened sex drive suddenly, and you'll notice it because you don't expect it to happen, and that's something I look for me personally when an episode is beginning, because I notice I have a high sex drive all of a sudden. Another sign, having reactions that don't really line up with reality. If a friend just told you that they didn't feel like hanging out today, could they do another day? You might get really upset about that, and it doesn't really match the situation. And part of that is the heightened emotion, but really you just notice you're reacting like way over the top. Really just think about emotional reactions that are kind of out of pocket. Another thing, sleeping way less or not at all. I mean, some people go days without sleeping. I always make sure that I try to sleep at least a little, but it definitely looks like for me suddenly waking up at 6 in the morning instead of 8. Or having trouble going to bed, not being able to go to bed until 3 a.m. when I normally go to bed at 11. Impulsive or risky behaviors. This could be running yellow lights when you're driving, when you normally stop at a yellow light. Or this could be wanting to dye your hair suddenly and not expecting to. This could be speaking out more in class or at work when you normally don't. This could be deciding suddenly that you're such a lucky person, you should go gambling. And then you go and gamble all your money away because you think you're gonna win it back. It could be suddenly deciding that you're a great florist and you should open a flower shop, and you go take out loans to do it when you definitely never planned to do that in the first place. I would definitely say if you're starting to have thoughts about starting a new business venture, put that on hold and check things out, because it's something that a lot of people do when they're having a manic episode. And then the last thing, psychotic symptoms, hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, dissociation. Those things normally happen in the midst of an episode. You won't normally see that in the beginning. So those were general examples of warning signs that can start before a depressive episode or a manic or hypomanic episode. Now with mixed episodes, it generally starts as one or the other, but if you start to notice both, then that's probably a sign of a mixed episode. So you're probably thinking, okay, now what? I know what to look for, but what happens when that happens? Well, identifying an episode is only the beginning. You have to know what your signs are, because it's not going to be the same for everyone. More than that, you need to tell your social support circle what symptoms to look out for as well, because sometimes we don't always notice it because our thinking changes, but other people tend to notice the behavior. So it's definitely something you want to tell your close friends and family members about, so that you have someone on the outside to keep you accountable. And I talked about this in the How to Care for Your Loved Ones Who Have Bipolar video. I talked about how you need to communicate with your loved ones about the best way for them to approach you if they're concerned about your symptoms. Whatever works for you, you need to tell them. When it gets to the point, this is when all of your coping mechanisms need to come into play. If you don't have coping mechanisms, you do, you just don't realize it. You can go to a therapist and work on coping mechanisms. You can look up coping mechanisms. Generally, things that are coping mechanisms are hobbies, like drawing, writing songs, songs, singing, playing music, sewing, crafting, playing sports, whatever you need to do, you need to have coping mechanism skills because that will save you with bipolar episodes. That will help you get through it. I can do a whole video on coping mechanisms if that's something that you guys want. Just because you have a relapse doesn't mean it's going to be completely out of control or that you did something wrong or that it's the end of the world, even though it can feel like that. You have options. Keep up with your medication because that helps so much no matter what. Even if you start to feel better, keep taking your medication because when you stop taking it, you will start to feel worse again, and that can absolutely trigger an episode. Taking care of yourself, sleeping enough, having a daily routine you stick to, healthy eating, avoiding stress, exercise, going to therapy, taking your meds, drinking water, these are all really important things. You have to keep up with those things so your episode doesn't get out of control. I know that generally I may stay up a little bit later on a weekend despite needing to stick to a sleep schedule, but if I'm having an episode, I stick to a sleep schedule and I try to do whatever I can to stay on it because that sort of stability, the same with daily routines, will help your body regulate and start to get back to normal, or at the very least manage the episode better. Generally, the reason you would have a relapse would be a stressful event like somebody passing away or a sudden and devastating change like getting fired from work or moving across the country. Could be breaking up with a significant other, having a child, changing your medication or not taking your medication, trauma trigger or experiencing trauma, or missing your therapy sessions, drinking too much, not sleeping enough, abusing substances. These are all things that can trigger a relapse. There are ways to prevent triggering an episode. I'm going to talk about that in a whole separate video talking about how to get stable with bipolar disorder, and that's all about taking care of yourself and what you need to focus on for yourself as someone with bipolar disorder because it's a little different. So if you're looking forward to that video, I'll try and do that one next. Let me know if there's any questions you have in the comments. I will answer. If you have any video suggestions, please put them in the comments, and check out the playlist I have with all the other videos I've done on bipolar disorder. If you're having some problems that are really specific and you'd like to message me, you can do so on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. All of my socials are down below, and if you want daily content, I usually do daily content about bipolar disorder on TikTok, so definitely go follow that if you want more of that. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for watching.